Okay, Bryan Ross will be calling in around 10:30. He has to do a little running around this morning. I'll tell you a secret. I'll tell you Bryan Ross' secret. He has to pick up his kid, and he's also hitting the gym. I'm like, I'm not going to interfere with that. Good for you. You give him a couple of days, he's going to be buff like Schwarzenegger. I'm telling you. All right. So real quick, I'm going to do a brief opening monologue. I'm going to chat with the peeps, and then around 10:30, we'll have us a nice, hilarious chat with Bryan Ross. I've got a bazillion questions for him. I've got literally twice as many questions as what I had the last time I had him on. So last night I did it to myself. I couldn't resist. I actually watched the season finale of The Chosen. I mean, it's like watching a train wreck. I've already put in so much time. Why not just see the season 2 to the very end? And this thing was hot garbage. Hot. I mean, this was a dumpster fire of garbage. I hated this episode more than any other, and I'll just real quickly highlight it. Let me tell you, you just go straight to the scenes with Jesus and Matthew, and I watched them 3 times just to make sure. Here you have Jesus practicing the Sermon on the Mount, thinking through what he's going to say when he gives the Sermon on the Mount. And he's asking Matthew for feedback, and he's asking him, what concerns you? You can be honest with me. I won't be offended. Matthew actually gives him suggestions. He makes changes to the Sermon on the Mount based on the suggestions Matthew gives him. Are you kidding me? Do you guys even read your Bibles? That's just, I mean, it's heretical, truly. It's truly heretical. Now, okay, Joel, how do you know that Jesus didn't think through his sermons, and he didn't practice them, and he didn't get feedback from the disciples? He didn't think through anything he said. He spoke the words that the Father gave him. You remember what he said in John 12, when he was talking to the unbelievers, all the massive group of unbelievers? He told them, starting verse 49, John 12:49, "For I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. And I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Whatsoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak." He didn't ask for feedback from Matthew or anybody else about what he was going to do or what he was going to say. He did the will of his Father, because what the will of his Father would give everyone everlasting life. Absolute heresy. And I'm convinced that this, I forget this ignorant brethren who runs the whole thing, whatever his name is. People have been sharing concerns about how the Latter-day Saints, they own all the sets, all the crew, they do the distribution and stuff. And I'm convinced that what you're seeing on that show is a portrayal of Christ strictly as a human. And it's that Latter-day Saint view that he would not achieve his deity until the crucifixion, which is absolute blasphemy. Blasphemy, total, all of it. And they aren't just ignoring the word, they are going out of their way to distort and go flat out against what the word says. And I have charted a lot the factual errors of that show for a long time. So the Sermon on the Mount. So then, and not only that, you get to the end of the show. I gotta shut up. You get to the end of the show, the Sermon on the Mount, and they didn't even get that right. I mean, they didn't actually show the sermon. They showed Jesus. He walked past the disciples to go speak to the crowd to give the Sermon on the Mount. This sermon he'd been thinking through, and told Matthew. Matthew doesn't understand why he's doing any of this stuff. Jesus is like, well, I'm here to give a revolution. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But he walked past the disciples to the crowd, which is not what happened. You look at Luke 6. Luke 6, you have, like in verse 19, this is what happened. And the whole multitude, he had these multitude of people that sought him. I mean, he was, massive crowds. He went to a high place in a mountain, and he, in verse 19, and the whole multitude sought to touch him, for there went virtue out of him and healed them all. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, "Blessed be ye poor, for yours is the kingdom of God." And then he goes into the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount wasn't a message he gave to the multitudes. That was a message he gave to the disciples in front of the multitudes. They couldn't even get that right. What was the point of the Sermon on the Mount? Here's a good question. What was the point of the Sermon on the Mount? I mean, clearly the Sermon on the Mount had the messianic kingdom in view, but you have, with all the blessings that he's talking about in the Beatitudes, he's giving the people hope before you have all the persecution and the tribulation to come. And he's also giving them spiritual guidance about how to live in the face of the awful stuff to come. I remember, I liked how Baker said that the purpose of the sermon is to instruct the disciples how to live in view of the persecutions and the tribulations which they would suffer while waiting for the actual establishment of the kingdom. That's as good a summary as I've heard. The sermon was given to the disciples in the presence of a multitude. The sermon does not present the gospel or explain how sinners may be saved. Rather, it is addressed to people who were already saved, who could call God their heavenly Father. And you take, for example, and I'll close with this. Here's an example of the Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That's a quote from Psalm 37:11. But the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Or you have also Isaiah 11:4. With righteousness shall he judge the poor and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. Meekness, patience, it's strength under control. Is that what we do? Do we exhibit meekness so that we might inherit the earth? Is that what we're doing? You know, when Paul writes to the body of Christ, it's in a completely different vein. Like Colossians 3:12, for example. Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering. We don't put on the virtues of humility and meekness in order to inherit the kingdom or even gain entrance into heaven or to inherit the earth. These virtues are already ours in Christ because they are attributes of the new man that God has already given us. We don't do something to gain something, but we accept what Christ has already done. And we step into that new role, putting on that new man that we have in Christ. And we willingly embody those godly attributes out of an attitude of gratitude for all that he's done for us. It's through that study of his word Bryan talked about yesterday. Study of his word, prayer, meditation, on all those things Paul talks about. The sound doctrines of grace, all the things that are lovely, pure, virtuous, praiseworthy. You think on those things, and in that you can appropriate the fruit of the Spirit. You put on the new man because God's already given it to you. Okay, Jill's going to stop ranting. Hey, this is the Grace Life Podcast. I am your mad, bad brother in Christ. I'm some guy named Joel. We're going to have some guy named Bryan on soon. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. We've got tons of links beneath the video. If you click show more beneath the video, there's links to just a bazillion things. There's links to everything related to Bryan, all the websites, links to all the books. We're going to talk about the 2 latest books that he put out. We've got links to a book I put out called Empowered by His Grace, all about what God made you in Christ, giving you to see yourself as God sees you in His Son, dead, buried, and risen with Christ. The old you gone forever, now literally freed from the condemnation and the bondage to sin. And you reckon it so, because you are now literally freed from sin, which is the spiritual reality of what God made you in Christ. That's my favorite topic ever. And then we've got links to a whole bunch of other stuff, links to some grace goodies, a ton of messages. Yesterday was an unusual day in which you could actually watch videos of both me, Fred, and Hal preaching on the same day. And Hal did a wonderful job out there in Bob Picard's church. Did you see Hal? He opened up the message. He turned to Bob. He says, look, I drove a bunch of miles to come out here, and I only have one question for you. Are you Bigfoot? Hal was telling me yesterday that one of the members of Bob's church told Hal he looked like Billy Graham. And Hal says, well, okay, I'll take that as a compliment. So I don't mind looking like him so long as I don't preach like him. We got a bunch of then you go to the very bottom, there's a link to a page on our website where you can see a whole bunch of Christian news. There's a bazillion news links I've got on our website today. So check it out. I got to see who's in the house. How you guys doing? Oh, for all the newbies, you might be wondering, why is Joel saying mad, bad? We are mad in the sense of mid-acts dispensational, bad in the sense of blessed and delivered. I'm just your co-host today on Flight 777 of Titus 213 Airlines, ready to take off at a moment's notice. I don't know why it's cracking me up today. It's awesome having you guys here. Oh, I got to get myself. How about this? We are watching the countdown to the showdown of Armageddon, and we're going to party like it's Revelation 19:9. I hope you guys are doing great. Okay, so we've got, I need to, I'm sorry, one more thing. I'm going to get in the live chat here. So sorry. There we go. I got to get my Brian Ross interview document open. We've got Charlotte Allman in the house. How you doing? It's awesome having you here. Welcome. She says, good morning, Joel. My name is Charlotte, a friend of Douglas Graham. I'm new to Right Division. Could you please pray for my understanding of Right Division? Absolutely. First of all, I love me some Douglas Graham. I pray for him literally every day on this program. And I love him dearly out there in the UK, one of my UK brothers. And let's see here. We've got 15 minutes. Now, there is beneath the video a link to a book that I wrote called Empowered by His Grace. That, I say download that, because the first thing I and probably everybody else would want you to understand, I really want you to understand what God made you in Christ. First and foremost, before you even get into Right Division or any of that stuff, understand who you are in Christ. You've got to understand that, because that goes to the very core of your entire spiritual life. And it is a cause. That's why you have peace. That's why you wake up every morning rejoicing in Him. And you got to understand that. And that's basically a study on Romans 6 and dead, buried, risen with Christ. The new spiritual reality of what God made you in His Son the moment you believed. And you realize, eternally secure, you've been identified with Christ's work on that cross, such that you are literally living His resurrection life in the here and now, which is why Paul tells you to walk in the newness of life, The old you gone forever. You are now a new creature. Behold, all things new. You're complete in him, which Hal talked about yesterday. You are lacking nothing. You are overflowing. You're filled full. Colossians 2:13 says he's forgiven you all trespasses. Everything about right division is good news. Good news that goes to the deepest human needs. So that's what I would recommend for you. But I will pray for you also. And if you actually, no, that wasn't Brian Ross. And if it was, I would have made him go to voicemail. Dan, thank you, Brian Ross, for all that you do for the body of Christ. He's probably listening. So, Bob Picard said, and how you doing, man? How are you? How's the beard? Did you clean it this weekend? Bob Picard, the man, the myth. How are you, man? We got, Bob says, welcome aboard, Charlotte. It's great to have you. High altitude Bob. Sonia's in the house. How are you? She says, good morning, Charlotte. Will do. Welcome. Sonia's a beautiful saint in Christ. It's awesome having you here, Charlotte. It really is. Bob Picard said, Brian Ross, the original Bigfoot enthusiast. I got some Bigfoot questions, but they're not terribly funny. I am going to bring it up, so you guys will have to. I was thinking what I'll do is I'll start with some personal stuff, then I'll dive right into all of the questions I acquired from all of the online saints, just because those are hilarious. Then we'll talk about the books, and then I'll get back into the live chat and then read to Brian any questions that you guys have, or questions or statements that you guys have. That's kind of generally what I had in mind for today. Now let me see here. Anita is in the house. How are you? She says, hi, Joel and Pastor Brian Ross won't be able to stay the whole podcast, but we'll listen later. That is no excuse. That is no excuse. No, I love you, Anita. I love you dearly. It is so fantastic having you here, and I really appreciate you stopping by. Hope to be at the conference in the fall. You and me both. I mean, not hoping that you'll be there. Wild horses couldn't stop me from being there. Hey, we got Lourdes from Puerto Rico. My sweet sister, how are you? She says, good morning, saints. Another great day to be edified by one of our grace pastors. Well, you're in luck, because which one is going to edify you, me or Brian? Oh, you think you're talking about? Well, you're right. Brian is the one who would edify you. I'll take that. Anita says, hello, fellow saints. What a mad, bad time will be had by all. Absolutely. Sonia says, good morning, everyone. Would love conference information also. Yeah, I'm going to bring it up with him. Absolutely. I've got some jokes from his. I heard his message from yesterday. I thought of some jokes, and I thought that'd be a great segue to talk about the conference. I can't wait. So, any questions that you have, you can put in the live chat now, and I'll copy and paste it and add it to my Brian Ross interview document that I've got here. K Deco, I love you. How are you? She says, good morning, our mad, bad pastors, Joel and Brian. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Ghost be with you all. Amen. Big hugs and much love. I love it. How you feeling, Kay? You doing better? I was so glad that you were feeling better on Friday. How you doing now? Did it improve for you over the weekend? For me, I'm starting to reach I'm getting a little tired, so I'm going to take Thursday off. This week I'm going to have, I got Brian today. I've got Josh Strzelecki tomorrow from Twin Cities. Can't wait to talk to him. Beautiful bald head he's got. I can't wait to ask him about that. Then I got to preach Wednesday, and I'm taking Thursday off. And then we'll be back here, hopefully with Freddie Bear on Friday for Open Chat Friday. So come on back. Let's see here. Oops. Let me get back up here. Oh, look at all the comments. Bryan is all the saints are ready. Hey, we got Bill the Bryan in the house. How are you? Karen said, enjoyed Hal's message yesterday on completing Christ, and now we know that Bob is not Bigfoot. The mystery continues. I'll tell you a secret. Hal was not thrilled about his performance on Sunday, and I'm thinking, you know what, brother? The wonderful thing about grace, even if you don't feel like you gave it your best performance, the sound doctrines of grace are always such good news. You can't help but rejoice. I always told Hal, I said, Hal, even on a bad day is better than a good Baptist. I love me some Hal, and I love Bob huge. Larry Hines is here. How you doing, my dear fellow brother from Nova Scotia, Canada? Awesome having you here, big guy. Dan said, wow, that is so horrible about the chosen. That's right. That's right. And I watch this garbage so you don't have to. You can thank me later. I don't know why, but man, I love ranting about that show. Hey, Freddie Bear is here. My beloved, beautiful Pastor Freddie Bear, who also delivered a fantastic message yesterday. The link to Fred's message is below, talking about working out your own salvation. I love that little puzzle. How do you explain that? Working out your own salvation. Neil Maranatha says, grace and peace to all the saints. Hi. My dear brother, I love you. I love you, Neil. We pray for you literally every single day. You are deeply missed, deeply loved. I know the COPD has got to be a difficult thing, and being out there in Wales, and I've seen photos of your family. I love your family. I love you dearly. I missed you. This is a saint that's been with us from the beginning, I think, for the most part. Sweetheart, beautiful man. If I could wrap my arms around you, dude, I totally would. I love you dearly. I think all the saints do. Douglas Graham is in the house also. Man, they let anybody in here, unfortunately. My beautiful British brother. How are you, man? Great seeing you here. Amy Stewart says, amen, preach, Joel. I'm starting with what your questions are going to be first, the ones you gave me this morning. Because I totally want to embarrass Amy Stewart up front. Karen says, good morning, precious saints. Welcome, Charlotte. I need the prayers as well after many years of right division. I'm struggling with a few things these days myself. Absolutely. There is nothing wrong with that. And I continue to pray for your stepdad and your mother, and if I remember right, it's your brother Doug also, and your stepdad's sons. So I'm going to keep you and the whole family in our prayers, and we mention you every day, and even when we're not live, when we do prayer session on like a Wednesday night and a Sunday morning, we mention you. So, K-Deco. I love me some K. Deco. Said, I started watching it, Joel, but it stopped 5 minutes into it, so I took that as a sign. Yeah, even God was disappointed in Hal Beckemeyer. Totally kidding, Hal. Totally kidding. Anita says, I am with Fred. I don't watch anything about Jesus anymore. Very sad what is done by the worldly approach. Totally. I think Fred probably is right. He just, no, I don't think any kind of dramatic portrayal of Jesus is appropriate, probably. I never knew what to think about that kind of stuff until now, and I think Fred's right. Just avoid them all. I do still like that Jesus of Nazareth series with Robert Powell, but his hair is too long. Karen says, good morning, precious Neil. That's right. Sue Ellen is here. How you doing? I was going to just lurk, but I must say a loving hello to Neil. That's right. Neil is just a beautiful man inside and out. Neil Tanya says, I think I mentioned before, when I was a makeup artist, wait, you were a makeup artist? Really? How did I not know this? I worked on a video for the Holy Land Experience for the original owner. The production company was owned by a Mormon, keeping it a secret. Yep. The Mormons, basically, well, you've got two things going against them. It's not just the fact that the Mormons own everything and they're in charge of the distribution. So if they don't like your content and your doctrine, they may choose to opt out. Number two, this, I forget the dude's name, the guy that you see him on before and after the Chosen episode. Apart from the fact that he said that basically God told him that his version of the dramatic presentation of the gospel is going to be the definitive version for the world. Balderdash, that alone should make you go running for the hills. But number two, the thing is, he has also been attached as a producer to a Mormon film about the devil. And you know what the Mormons think about the devil and Jesus? It's all heresy. It's all heresy, I'm convinced. They hooked us by accurately portraying a few moments of Scripture in the first season, and you have to admit the miracles of Christ were emotional, and they felt great. And how can they not be? It's got to be emotional. It had to have been emotional in real life. But then in the second season, the vast majority of everything you saw in the second season, you won't even find in Scripture. It was all pure fiction. And in fact, they would do like the portrayal of Mary Magdalene. There is nothing about Mary you would find in Scripture, really. And so you're interjecting your own social causes onto a real life person who is in the Scriptures, and now you're all of a sudden you're making people have the wrong impression about real people in the Bible. Oh, look at that. Domino's Pizza. Oh, we just deliver them frozen now. We don't have enough money to cook them anymore. Let me get you hooked up. Hang on. All right. All right, can you hear me okay, Bryan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, looky there. Awesome.
All
right. I knocked the coffee on the floor. The old ladies here are going to kill me. Awesome. Okay. Now, let me start with how you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing pretty good.
How's your family? How's Becky and the boys?
Boys are doing pretty good. Becky's doing well. June was a pretty busy month for us. We took a family trip out west. Then when we got home, we had a project in our house with redoing some flooring upstairs. And I just got back from picking up my oldest son from his first day of driver's ed.
All right, a couple of things. All right. First of all, now that photo of you and your family on your church on the Grace Life Bible website is kind of an older photo, and I noticed on the photos of your recent vacation, those boys have really grown up.
I need to update that.
That's okay. Are they both still in high school, and are they getting close to graduating or no?
So my oldest is 16. He's going to be a junior this year, coming school year, and my youngest is 13, and he's going into 8th grade. Now, do the boys actually attend the same school where you teach? Yeah, so Andrew is in the high school that I teach in, and Daniel will be when he gets to high school.
Oh, those poor kids. How awkward. Their own dad's a teacher in high school. Now,
yeah, Andrew didn't want to be in my class. So.
Oh, so they would actually let that happen. They would let your kid actually be in your class.
Oh, yeah, if I want, yes. If I requested that would happen.
And you're going to let him not be in your class? How can you not force the kid in the class? I would totally do that.
Well, I know the other teachers, and I've got a good relationship with them, and sometimes I think that it's probably maybe better if he isn't so embarrassed all the time. You know what I mean?
I don't believe in such things.
You don't.
Now, let me ask you a question. Now, yesterday in the sermon that you gave, which was phenomenal, about having the words of Christ dwelling in you richly, you gave an illustration that I loved. You were talking about if you invite somebody, if somebody invites you over to their house and they tell you, make yourself at home, you're not going to go to the fridge and pull out the milk bottle and start swigging the milk, right?
Yep.
And I thought, man, that's a great idea. When we when we have that conference in October, and I get invited, if I get invited to your house, I may go hunting the milk bottle just to see how much grace you guys have.
We'll have a never-ending supply at the church. You can drink all the milk you want.
Becky's going to be like, he's never coming back ever. All right, now let me see here. Now, I thought I might go into it might be fun just to ask the questions. I asked for feedback from all the peeps and the saints for some questions. So I thought I'd start with them, their questions, and then we'll get into the books, and then we'll get into live chat if that sounds okay with you.
Okay.
The first thing I want to do is embarrass Amy Stewart. Sorry. She says, ask Bryan if he worships the chart.
Yeah, that's a comment from yesterday's message when I was trying to make a point that, the word of Christ is not simply just like dispensational things related to being able to draw a dispensational chart, but it's all the practical life issues as well.
Amy Stewart wants to know if you're Bigfoot.
No, I'm not. I don't know who's comment bombing you, but it's definitely not me. I don't have time for that, Joel.
Karen Gray says, ask Bryan if he ever considered having an amanuensis. Amanuensis. You ever considered having that?
Well, actually, yes. At one point, I was looking into actively. I need money to do all this stuff, but I was looking into getting a transcriber, somebody who could, take my notes and my teachings and sit down and, transcribe them. And actually, Randy White at Dispensational Publishing House, some of the more recent books have come about through a ghostwriter taking my audio and my notes and then putting those things together into a written form. Right. And then all that stuff gets sent to me, and then I obviously have final, editing rights and, control what's in the final product. But to some extent, that's already happened. Right.
The reason I loved Karen Gray's question is because amanuensis is clearly a $5 word. And
I had some amanuensis.
It's probably a little more than $5. It's like at least $5.25. So I had to use at least one $5 word if I have Bryan Ross on the program.
Are you saying I use big words too much?
No.
If you are, my wife would agree with you.
So the Grace History Project, the book. How far along are we right now? Do you have a timeline as to when you want to have it published?
The short answer is I have no definitive timeline. What's happening now is a ghostwriter is basically following the process I just described. They're taking each lesson and my notes for each lesson, and they are transcribing those together into a chapter for each lesson, and then those go through. Randy White will look at the first round of work from the ghostwriter and either send it back or approve it before those things get sent on to me. Last time I talked to Randy, there were about 12 chapters that had been transcribed. And I have yet to see any of it. We kind of discussed waiting until there was a bigger bulk or chunk of material for me to go through. So that's kind of where it is now, and that's probably the update as of last month. Beyond that, I don't know where it stands at this time.
Do you have a sense as to how long this was going to be? Is this going to be more than one book, or are you going to try to get it all together in one book?
No, the original plan discussed was to do this in multiple volumes, and then depending on how many that was, then talk about, okay, then do we combine them into, maybe two bigger books or what? But
right.
If we waited until all of it was done, that could be quite a few years even.
Yeah. Are you thinking about, have you already divided up the time periods into which you're going to break up each of the volumes?
So we have a loose breakdown for the first, where we're going to break off the first one from the second one. And right. It's going to be right around the time period of, say, the end of the apostolic era, beginning of that first, era
right.
of the so-called church fathers.
Right.
So although that could still slide a little bit depending on how much material we end up with.
Right. Now let me see here. I went out of my way to find one of my favorite people in your church, Blake Donaldson.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, and because when you were on Randy White's live stream last year, Blake went out of his way to ask questions he knew would probably get you into trouble. And I immediately fell in love with him and Amy for that reason only. I don't really care about anything else about him, but so I am helping Blake with the library a little bit. So I told him I'm going to thoroughly inspect his library when I get there, and probably with a dust cloth. I have three questions from Blake. He says, Pastor Bryan, in your personal, private, subjective opinion, what is the continuity and discontinuity debate in theology about?
It's really a debate about whether or not, there's any continuity.
Best answer ever.
On that question, like in what arena? Because I feel like that could apply to a lot of things.
Probably meant to be that way. Here's a question I have. This one's probably going to get you in trouble, but this is a phenomenal question. He says, "What do you think of the types of Christian worship music in church, like traditional hymns, hip hop, rap, rock, metal, country, etc.?"
Well, since I know who's asking this question, I can say that all of those are thoroughly holy and sanctified, except rap.
I might be inclined to agree with you. Blake's third question is, should pastors speak out on political issues and society's cultural movements happening?
Well, that's a more serious question, and so it's one that I often struggle with, and Blake probably knows that, which is why he asked it, but I think the answer, and I think the answer is yes and no.
Right.
And I think that historically, if I look back, pastors have historically always tried to, at least good pastors, have always tried to give their people a scriptural framework to understand what's going on.
Right.
The problem with that, though, is when people, I find it a very difficult thing to be able to strike a balance between not getting overtaken by all of that. And I think that a lot of believers are so consumed with politics and current events and stuff, and that becomes their main focus and so forth, and they lose sight of setting their affection on things above and so forth. And so I think there's a fine line there. I have done it. I probably will do it. I am doing it right now to some degree, but I don't enter into those things usually without a lot of consideration of what I'm doing and what I want to say.
Now, we consciously here try to avoid politics, and except for it, just in the sense is, how do the sound doctrines of grace apply within the context of everything that's going on? You know, how are we to live? How are we how do we respond to things that are going on now? Because to me, I think, and I think politics is just getting in the weeds. The big picture, that's not the big picture. The big picture is God's eternal purpose to glorify his son in us. The big picture is eternity, not the temporary political conflicts that we're having to face. It's not like Paul, when he was arrested, before he was martyred, he went to Nero and said, hey, look, dude, we need to, you need to go back to that constitutional republic you had before Julius Caesar took it away, because people need to have more rights. When he was in front of Nero, he was focused on giving him the gospel,
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Joel. I tend to probably get in trouble with some people on some of this stuff, because it's just my observation that I don't care if you're on the political right or the political left, whatever your viewpoints are and so forth, but believers unfortunately tend to identify more often with their body politic than they do with the scriptures. And I think there are extreme views, frankly, on both sides of the aisle. And for me, I'm like, well, I'm a believing biblicist. I'm a mid-Acts Pauline dispensationalist. I'm a member of the body of Christ. That's who I am, and I need to judge every political ideology, movement, group, whatever, from the vantage point of Scripture, and not extra biblical things.
Right.
And
totally.
That puts me sometimes in positions where some people, don't agree with what I have to say about some things.
I can't imagine. I love those thoughts. I think that's those are. I could stay on that topic for a long time.
So can I add one more thought to that?
Oh, I'll give you two, brother.
Okay, it's my observation that what we have in front of us right now is the meltdown of what I call the meltdown of the moderated middle.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is not being a political moderate. I'm not talking about, being a moderate on the political spectrum. What I'm talking about is Paul says to let our moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. He talks about us behaving with temperance. And what I observe in believers, even rightly dividing mid-Acts Pauline dispensationalists, is a trend and a tend towards wild swings to one way or the other,
right,
without the application of Paul's principle of moderation.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you don't stand for anything or that you don't take any principled, action or decisions. It just means that you're cognizant of evaluating everything from the point of view of the scriptures and not from, what the media or whoever else would have you to believe. And I think that's a problem. I think, for example, like if I say that I'm against the flat earth, which I don't want to talk about, but I'm going to use this as an example. If I say I'm against the flat earth, then believers will hear me say that, and then they will automatically say that I am an atheistic NASA sympathizer who doesn't believe my Bible, because I would say that, because I take a particular position on the shape of the earth. Where's the moderated middle on that issue? I struggle to see it.
Yeah, I see a lot of you have, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that 2 Timothy 3, all the characteristics of men generally, the lovers of their own selves, all that long list of attributes, do you think we are seeing that in the world today?
I mean, it's hard. It's a cautionary answer, right? Because I don't want to say yes too emphatically, because ultimately I don't know.
Right.
But when I observe the behavior and conduct of the lost, the world, yes. But now what I wonder about those passages is, do we really need to be concerned when believers who are supposedly edified in sound doctrine are behaving in these ways? That to me is the real alarm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, personally, I would have no problem saying yes. And I think, a lot of the stuff that you're seeing with people in the world today is just, they're emotionally undisciplined. They're easily triggered. And when they are triggered, they're fierce. And a lot of that's probably bleeding over into the church to a certain degree. And, we have to, which just emphasizes that much more of teaching the people the sound doctrines of grace, especially identification, because that's what will bring them emotional balance and peace in their lives and rejoicing again. And I was thinking too, especially in light of Paul's last days, when I was going through 2 Timothy, I spent a year going through that book, and I loved the fact that Paul kept everything in its proper spiritual perspective, because you had the government mandated, sanctioned persecution of the Christians in the Roman Empire, which would last some 300 years, and yet Paul kept everything in his spiritual perspective because of the sound doctrines of grace. He stayed focused on the gospel. He told Timothy, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering, do the work of an evangelist, all that stuff, which I feel like is timeless and is more relevant to us today than ever.
I agree with that. And unfortunately, though, I've encountered people who, if you don't take up for, a given cause or whatever, the way that they think you should, then, then you're somehow not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Right. And that's where, to me, things become, I don't see Paul doing that. Right. Paul's primary objective was to preach the gospel, to have all men be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. Right. And he never called for
new reforms within the system, because regardless of the reforms, there's always going to be corruption. The solution isn't a new system. The solution is a new man. Right. And the bigger point is that to get wrapped up in politics is to get lost in the weeds, if you ask me. The big picture is not the politics. The big picture is the gospel of the grace of God, God's eternal purpose to glorify his Son in us. So rather than changing the system, Paul was focused on changing the people through the gospel.
And I think it's a cautionary tale, right? Because there's a lot of, I don't know if you've heard this terminology, but there's a lot of people that are talking about right now so-called Christian nationalism. Yep. And Christian nationalism really is post-millennial theology, which is anti-dispensational, anti-scriptural. Right. But you wave the flags in the way people want you to do when you get involved in that stuff, and you lose sight real fast of, wait a minute, is this stuff really in line with the word rightly divided? Right. So I mean, as controversial as it's been to me, I'm like, rather than being angry and upset about losing religious liberties, I think Paul he never even thought in those terms, and he was more upset about losing souls to an eternity in a lake of fire. What's more important, reforming an empire that'll only last another 400 years in Paul's case, or saving souls who be with Christ for all eternity? What was the bigger picture? Helping to make changes to a temporary system of government, or helping people receive the free gift of eternal life? The latter is infinitely more important. Exactly. What's the bigger picture? As a government that's just not going to, a total government that's not going to last, and have a little bit of reforms and a little bit of freedom before it dies, or to give people eternal life. That's the bigger picture. Always has been. I agree. Totally agree. And I have often thought, what's better? Temporary earthly benefits, in terms of religious freedom, civil liberties, or eternal rewards reigning with Christ. And you have to look, and I think you have to look at Paul, and you have to ask yourself, are we keeping everything in its proper spiritual context? Are we keeping ourselves focused on the big picture of God's eternal purpose? Don't get me started, dude. I'll out-talk you on this subject. Which is rare to do. Okay. Any other thoughts, Pastor? Like you said, I'm sure we could continue on that for a long time. But I'm no. Okay. Now, I have a question. Bryan C. Ross, you have on the covers of all your books. I've never asked you this question. What does C stand for? C stands for Christopher.
Christopher. Okay. All right. I was wondering. Okay. Were you named after anyone in particular, or was this a compromise between Mr. and Mrs. Ross?
Well, the story I've always been told was one of my parents, I can't remember which one, favored naming me Chris, like that being my name, making Christopher my name. And the other one objecting to it because they were afraid I would be made fun of and called crisscross.
You should have never. Don't say that kind of stuff in front of me, dude.
Yeah, I know. Now you're going to smear me.
I spent a year sending you Bigfoot memes, dude. Crisscross. I know, and I know Dan the man out there online is he's already typing away on the live chat. Okay, did you? I ranted about the Chosen finale. Did you watch that stupid thing last night?
Yes and no. I was struggling to stay awake, if I'm being honest. So I missed parts of it.
Let me see here. Okay, so how about we get into the books real quick, and then I'm going to get back into the live chat. Right, and one of the last time we had you on, you had just published the book on Easter, which was phenomenal. Now, beneath the video, there are links to everything related to Bryan Ross and links to all the books that he has available. So avail yourself of that over at Dispensational Publishing House. But I hadn't really talked about Rightly Dividing E.W. Bullinger, which I loved, and it's a quick read. I think I got that on my Kindle. And the story about E.W. Bullinger, it was surprising to me because I always had the story wrong, I guess, about how he came into Acts 28. I had always heard that. Charles Welch, he walked into Bullinger's office one day and just kind of, challenged him on the Acts 28 position. And after some time, basically Bullinger says, boy, George, you're right. This messes up everything I've written all my life, And then he transitioned to the Acts 28 position. But that's not really the story, is it?
No, in fact, I argue, and I think lay out pretty clearly in the book that, Welch tells that story years after the fact.
Right.
He tells, I'm trying to look for the exact date here, and he tells that story in 1949.
Right.
Of what happened to him, of what happened in 1908.
Right.
So, you're talking almost, over 40 years of gap between when he's telling the story and what he's saying occurred in 1908. And he does tell the story in his biography that he walks into Bullinger's, he requests an audience with Bullinger. He walks into Bullinger's office and he basically says to Bullinger something to the effect of, well, am I understanding you correctly that the dispensational boundary should be drawn at Acts 28? And Bullinger says yes. And then Welch responds and says, well, why have you not divided Paul's epistles into two groups then with respect to that dispensational boundary?
Right.
And yeah, that's the story Welch told in 1949 about what occurred. The reality is that prior to that, in 1907, a writer in the Things to Come journal named J.J.B. Coles had already written an article making that exact point. He did that in February of 1907, and the next month or the month after, I can't remember if it was March or April, Bullinger wrote an article in the Things to Come journal, basically fully endorsing what Coles had said.
Right.
So I have serious issues with Welch's account of things, and it raises a lot of questions like what's going on here.
If I remember right, you actually was able to chart in Things to Come. Bullinger was already headed in that direction long before he ever even met Charles Welch. Was that right?
So yeah, if you back up, so what I did is I started by gathering all. So this, I don't know if you're going to find this boring or not, but
not me. Others maybe, but not me.
What I did is I applied a research method called historiography, I might have talked to you about this before, but what you do is you find all of the books that a guy wrote, and then you line them up in front of you in chronological order of the year that they were written.
Right.
And then you read them with the goal of ascertaining the thought development. How did this guy develop these thoughts as time went on?
Right.
And it's really clear when you do that with Bollinger that in the 1890s, before the turn of the century, he clearly was what I would consider to be a modern mid-Acts dispensationalist who taught the Acts 13 position.
Right.
Then what I've argued and what I've observed is the book The Silence of God by Sir Robert Anderson is the book that inserts into this dispensational thought stream this idea that the book of Acts is its own dispensation. And then that idea influences Bollinger, who is friends with Sir Robert Anderson. And then in the next decade, between 1900 and 1910, you start to see Bollinger drifting in his thoughts in the direction of Acts 28. I called it Acts 28 in embryonic form. And until I knew about the thing with Coles, I had believed Welch's story.
Right.
But Welch's story is clearly not true. So to summarize all that, he starts out mid-Acts, then he starts to drift, and after the conversation with Coles, he comes out and basically fully endorses this division of Paul's epistles into two groups with respect to Acts 28, which for me is the sort of, one of the major planks in the Acts 28 position that makes it what it is.
Right. I got to say, probably the one thing we have in common apart from the grace message would be just a love of research. And the research you put into Bollinger's book and being able to chart that progression was so well done. That was the most impressive aspect of that book for me, because I know that had to have been a ton of work. And, ever since that book came out, I think a member of I think it might have been Cliff Matthews told me in the live chat, told me that the Things to Come had finally been digitized, the volumes of those periodicals. And so I downloaded them all, I added them, and I've done searches on certain topics and Things to Come. And I mean, Bollinger, anything outside of Bollinger was terrible. There is nobody in his day that could even compare to Bollinger in terms of depth and critical thinking. But even then, and anything you're going to find in there by Bollinger, you probably already read somewhere else. For you to go through the Things to Come like you did and be able to chart that progression, that was just amazing. That was just amazing. I really loved that aspect of the book. So well done, and I totally recommend to anybody. Rightly Dividing E.W. Bollinger. It's a fascinating read. Bollinger, not to mention a little scandalous, Bollinger was married to Emma, who was 12 years his senior. How awesome is that? What do you think about that, Bryan?
So I'll comment in a different direction. I mean, age difference, you could, obviously anyone could have their opinion about that, but I don't really believe, it's my observation from reading the Bollinger biography by Juanita Carey and just looking at the massive amount of material that Bollinger did, so you got to understand, this guy is the treasurer for the Trinitarian Bible Society. Right. He's pastoring for a while a church. He's the editor-in-chief of the Things to Come, plus all of the other stuff that he's writing. And I just know from personal experience that doesn't leave a lot of time for a wife and family if you look at what Bollinger's doing. Right. So I think their marriage was probably quite a cold marriage. I think he spent a lot more time with his books than he did with his wife. I'll just say it that way. Yep.
But yet, that brain, Bollinger's brain is something to behold. I actually did a Bollinger sermon once here. There were the 10 sermons. There's one book of 10 sermons on the Advent that he did. And there was one sermon that he did that I loved, and it was all about the application of the rapture. He made the point that the rapture in Paul's epistles was always in the context of service, and it was always used as a means of motivating you to service. And I loved that message, and so I totally did a Bullinger sermon one night here. Bullinger could preach too. The man could preach. I don't know. He may have been as boring as dog snout. I don't know, but he could preach. And the Bullinger, his preaching style was exegesis from beginning to end. No personal stories. He didn't take his time dilly-dallying, talking about his personal life. It was pure exegesis from beginning to end, and it was addictive for me. Reading those sermons. So, little known fact, Bullinger can preach. You can actually hear a Bullinger sermon.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with you. The corpus of everything that he did is absolutely amazing. And I'll say this, he's also widely misunderstood, and he was misunderstood by the American Pauline dispensationalists of the 20s and 30s, and O'Hare actually went through a period of time where he was drifting towards Bullingerism, right, and ultimately pulled back from all of that. So when you read, for example, a lot of people will read Ironside, H.A. Ironside's book, Wrongly Dividing the Word of Truth, and they'll think they assume he's talking about Bullinger. He's not talking about Bullinger. He's talking about O'Hare, right, and where he perceived O'Hare to be headed at that point in time. So, yeah, there's a lot of so where I'm going with this is what we're talking about here with Bullinger in this conversation and in the book is really what we call historical theology, right, where you seek to understand the historical development of thought through time, right, and the early light bearers of the mid-Acts dispensational movement in the United States, specifically O'Hare, Stam, and Baker, historical theology was never something that they, it was never even on their radar. So if they would have sat down and read Bullinger in order, I think they would have had a much different understanding of Bullinger and been able to use Bullinger to their advantage in certain instances. Right.
Let me ask you. Here's a question I've always had. And maybe I read this in your Grace History Project notes and I've forgotten. But was Bullinger the first one to technically be mid-Acts, or was that Charles Henry McIntosh? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I do. So I would say that. So there's a whole generation of Plymouth Brethren writers, right, starting with Darby and then advancing through the middle part of the 1800s. And McIntosh is in that sequence. Right. Those guys, so the early guys, Darby and Kelly and some of those guys, they always thought the church started in Acts 2. But then when you get to a guy who most people have never probably heard of, his name's William Holden, and he wrote a book on, I'm not talking about the actor, he wrote a book about the mystery. He wrote a book about Ephesians where he is very clear that, there are still things happening for Israel after Acts 2. He sees a significance with the stoning of Stephen in Acts 7 and a significance with Paul's conversion in Acts 9, but he never really gets to the point where he says, okay, I believe the church began here.
Okay. Let me, I'm not sure I've heard of William Holden. That's a name that, or maybe I've forgotten. This is a Plymouth Brethren from the 1800s?
Yeah, his book was The Mystery on Ephesians 3. I'll cover him extensively in the Grace History Project. Okay, that's
enough said, right?
His honestly, when I read his book, I about fell out of my seat because it sounded like I was reading Satan and His Plan of Evil by Keith Blades. I've probably forgotten that, and I'm gonna look that up. Great. Okay.
So
then what I would say, Bollinger is the first guy that I can find.
Right.
So I'm going to qualify this slightly. He's the first guy that explicitly says, look, Paul's sermon in Acts 13 in Antioch of Pisidia was a dispensational epoch. That was his language. That was his terminology. So he is identifying that a dispensational change occurred in Acts 13 when Paul preached that message. To me, that is an enunciation of the Acts 13 stripe of the mid-Acts view.
Right.
And he said that, by the way, in his book on the mystery that he wrote in 1895.
Right. I'm gonna totally look that up and read it, and I just may add me a new folder to my searchable riches. By the way, William Kelly, one of my all-time favorites. I love reading him. And William Kelly, he can be dry at times, and then at times he'll write about grace and love that'll move your soul. But he wrote of all the books on Philemon I've read them all. All the books I've read on Philemon, William Kelly had the best commentary, just so you know. Him and William Graham Scroggie, A Note to a Friend. Those are the two best commentaries you can get on Philemon. But William Kelly especially, man, years ago here, I was quoting chunks of paragraphs from William Kelly on everything he had to say about grace when I was doing a series on Philemon. But that's, okay, fascinating about William Holden. You know what? I think I'm going to go to the live chat, and then we're going to come back to talk about your new book on Psalm 12. Does that sound okay, Bryan? You got
whatever you want, Joel. I'm along for the ride with you here.
All right, you got some time with us, brother?
I got some more time. Yeah, I'll let you know if I run out of time.
Well, I probably will forbid it. Sonia says, I think I'm okay. Let me get down here to now. There was some comments early on.
Joel, I hope I'm not boring everybody.
I can't imagine why. I mean, that's the kind of talk that electrifies me. But I'm weird like that. Bob says you can always get the Chosen app and do the rosary through it. Yeah, Bob Picard pointed out that Jesus. He shared with me a video of Jesus who had. He's promoting a Catholic app now. So Jesus is apparently Catholic. We've got a bunch of greetings. Dan says, wow, Bob, really? Hal Beckham. Now, we have a guy here. I don't know if you've... now, there's a pastor here. His name's Bob Picard. He's up in Massachusetts. Dear brother, basically Baptist background, came into Right Division, and now he's heading this historic church in Massachusetts. He's hilarious. He's the one that does videos about David Reed's thespian abilities. and I love him to death. And Hal was at his church last weekend and preached. So there's a lot of talk here about Bob Picard, but there is a theory that Bob Picard is Bigfoot. He has that kind of sense of humor, Okay. But because we've had Bigfoot in the live chat quite a few times. Dan says, Bob, I enjoyed Hal yesterday. Excellent. I'm going to go through here and search for things for Bryan real quick. Just going to skim here and see what the folks have to say. We've got Maria J. Martin in the house. Unfortunately, we can't screen these people, Bryan. I'm sorry that we got Maria here. She said, good morning, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ. Love you and miss you all dearly. I love you too, Maria, most of the time. Let's see here. Let me scroll down here and find. Sonia says, "Good morning, Pastors Joel and Fred, and Pastors Bryan. Awesome having you here, Sonia." Nita says, "Yes, identity is a linchpin to staying with Right Division. I love teaching Romans. I learned so much myself." Yes, I have a theory. That, actually it's not a theory. I think if you have a newbie just gets saved. And tell me what you think, Bryan. I say you just follow the structure of Romans, because once you get through the gospel toward the end of Acts 5, the first thing he teaches you is identification, and then it isn't until later that you get into dispensational stuff in chapters 9 to 12, or 9 to 11, I should say. So I think, once they get saved, then you teach them identification and then right division. But, when I was growing up, it was always the other way around. If you even got taught identification at all. Do you have a process that you think that newbies ought to go through after they get saved in terms of doctrine?
Well, I can't disagree with your statements about Romans. Romans is foundational for our doctrine for today, and it does kind of lay things out. The issue I always face practically as a pastor is, so I got this visitor now who's coming to my church, right? And I've got 50 other people, let's say, in my assembly who have been with me for some 13 years, some 5 years, some whatever, and everybody, regardless of what I've taught when and to who, everyone's always at a different place in their understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question then of how do you deal with that is, it's not an easy question to answer, and I always just fall back to people need to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. And to me, the knowledge of the truth includes the dispensational stuff and the practical identification stuff.
Right.
So I don't have the answer as far as you have to do it in a certain way or in a certain order. And I would add, I think there are mindsets out there who do say that, who turn the whole thing into a very sort of rigid curriculum system where if you don't do it this way, you're not properly edified, which I think is also, for me, that's extreme.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Amy Stewart says, Bryan, are you riding along with Andrew for driver's ed? Very exciting experience. Blake says, I wonder if he has the toy steering wheel with the squeaky horn. LOL. I love your people. I love your people almost as much as I love my own. They're hilarious. That's awesome. Does it make you nervous he's getting his license?
I mean, there's a little bit of nerves, but mostly I just need him to get it so I don't have to be the taxi all the time.
Do your boys know what they want to be when they grow up already?
It's a great question. No. Just to be blunt, no. And I'm actually trying to... I'd like to see them, develop a skill or a trade and not necessarily go to a 4-year college. There's too much craziness right now in that arena. And
I totally agree. Let me ask you this: do you have now? You're one of the few Christians I know who actually has his kids in public school system. Have you gone out of your way to prepare them for that? Or, I guess living with Bryan Ross as the pastor of Grace Life Bible, they're pretty well prepared for public school. Would you recommend that, do you have any thoughts about parents and homeschooling and all of that?
I have a lot of thoughts about all these topics. I tend to keep them to myself because this is another general subject matter where believers have a lot of different opinions. And I don't believe that there's any foolproof way to raise a kid and make sure they turn out the way that you want them to. I've seen public school kids turn out great. I've seen public school kids go really sideways. The same with homeschooled kids or Christian schooled kids or, whatever. And I wouldn't want to, take away somebody's liberty to do what they want to with their own kids. That's not my place.
Right.
And, we have folks in our assembly. Some of them homeschool. Some of them go to public school. And I just... that's not my place, in my opinion, to mandate to a family what they should do with their kids.
Yeah, I just see a lot of articles on Christian News about it. The name just escaped me, but there a lot of public figures in Christianity saying you need to get your parents need to get your kids out of public schools, and you need to do the homeschooling thing. And yet at the same time, a lot of kids who are well grounded in spiritual matters, who really have a heart for the Lord, I'll bet they could probably handle themselves well in a public school system.
So my opinion, and again, if Blake's on here still, this is my personal, private, subjective opinion. I don't let anybody else do it. I don't judge anybody if they disagree. But my attitude has always been, eventually I'm going to have to release them into the world. They are not going to be in my charge and in my care forever. And I would rather them face different thinking, different thoughts, etc., while I am here to guide them through all of that, than to keep them, isolated from all of that, and then say, "Here, go out into the world," and they don't have any experience of, being around anybody who thinks anything different than them. Now, that's my opinion, and I certainly would not hold anybody else to that. I know, again, of a great number of kids who have had things work out or not work out, regardless of the decisions the parents made.
Dan the man says, Bryan, aren't you worried about blasphemy, the Holy Ghost rider? I don't think one jot or tittle will get past Bryan. I have had I have encountered what it's like to proofread something of theirs, and they don't miss a detail. Let's see here. Blake Donaldson says, "Oh, come on, Christian rap is awesome."
Blake, we always have a disagreement on that one.
I'm telling you, I have you name me one good Christian rapper. This I got to hear, because I've tried listening to Christian rap. I don't know if there's what's a good Christian rapper. Who is? Do you know of any?
Blake's gonna say NF or the Gospel Gangsters. He's
yes,
say the Gospel
they're
Gangsters.
terrible. They're terrible. They had one good song, and it's all me, and I'm all screwed up, and I've got all these issues. Dude, grow up. Learn who you are in Christ, man. Pull your pants up and be a big boy, and quit singing about your problems. Really annoys me. Hey, now you are, and we have only briefly talked about you love Christian metal, if I remember right. There's some Christian metal bands you love. I actually saved some of their songs because you love them. Let me see here.
Oh, brother.
Who was it? Was it Seventh Day Slumber? Is that one? No. Mortification? Is that it?
I used to like them.
The Primitive Rhythm Machine. I have that one saved.
I don't have that. I never liked them. I was a '90s guy, so like I liked Tourniquet and stuff like that. Stuff probably no one listening to this has ever even heard of.
Tourniquet, yes. I knew of. I had one of their albums, and I couldn't stomach it. You probably would have given me enormous grief had you known me back then. I stuck with. I was Whiteheart all the way, man. The old Whiteheart stuff was like Christian U2, Sing Your Freedom, Let the Kingdom Come. I was a mid-axe dispensationalist when that song came out, and I had no problem with it because it rocked so hard.
Yeah, the other one. I remember being in my bedroom and I was playing, White Cross.
Oh yeah.
White Cross had that song, In the Kingdom, and I was playing that, and my dad walks in and he goes, this song's not doctrinally accurate.
Oh, man, I wish I grew up in your neighborhood. I would have loved hanging out with your father, probably almost as much as you, man. How's your dad doing, by the way? He did a phenomenal job. What was it, 2 Sundays ago when he stopped by? I get the impression Steve Ross has improved ever so slightly in his abilities with technology. I mean, he was rocking the computer pretty well until Bryan had to speak up toward the end. And that was actually a great sermon. I really love that contrast. Here you have the guy who's never been to college, reading the scholars and just saying, dude, there's simple answers to these reasons why you've abandoned biblical truth. And I loved that whole aspect of it. Now, Steve said that even though he didn't go to college, his son did, but he taught you everything you know. Would you agree with that?
My dad definitely taught me a lot. I remember when I was a freshman at the time Grace Bible College, now Grace Christian University. So my mom and dad were dropping me off, and my dad he looks at me and he goes, "This last thing he said to me before he left, I remember it like it was yesterday. He goes, 'Son, don't let them ruin you.'"
That's awesome. That's awesome, actually. That's really awesome. You know how much I love your dad. That's phenomenal. It really, it's the sermon that he did at your church was just, you don't see it coming, but when you think about it, it's just brilliant in that contrast between the simplicity that's in Christ, the simple answers to these big problems that these theologians can't seem to wrap their heads around. It's all so simple, and it's so easy that even a guy like me can understand my Bible. And look at these scholars and just go, guys, what are you thinking? The answers are right, black and white, right in front of you. I love that message. I thought it was phenomenal.
I'd say 2 things about my dad. First one is my dad actually is a pretty big techie. He's a video gamer. He doesn't tell anybody, but he's a video gamer.
No way. Steve Ross, a gamer? Are you kidding me?
And he actually is very tech savvy for, not to age discriminate here, but for his age, he's very up on a lot of things related to technology. And the other thing I'd say, and this is just my own personal, private, subjective opinion, I think my dad is a very underrated pastor.
Oh, he's literally one of the best in the movement. I love him to death. Is he speaking at the July conference?
Yes, I believe he is, yes.
Every year when you have the July conference, your dad's the first one I look for. He's literally the first one I look for. I steal all his jokes, literally. He still has that joke I love where he did, it was at a July conference, he was talking about divine intervention. And he's like, if your car breaks down, if you get a flat tire, that doesn't mean God's mad at you. It means you need to get AAA. That's my favorite Steve Ross line. I love that man.
My dad is, he's got a dry sense of humor, and I would honestly say this, I don't know if he's listening, but he doesn't try to be funny. It's just what he says comes out funny. It's just weird.
Well, and there is, and I talk a lot about tone. I have attitude, tone, big deal to me with pastors, and there's nobody behind the pulpit that's sweeter. And he's just sincere and he's just genuine when he talks. What you see is what you get with him. And you don't see any falsity, anything. He's just sharing what he thinks, and you can't help but love that. He's really, in a lot of ways, very much a model for me. Although I've got a lot of great models out there, but he's literally up there, one of my all-time, one of my favorites. It's hard to top O'Hare, but Steve Ross, I really love him to death. One of these days, I'm going to talk him onto the show, but I got to get more material on him, like the fact that he's a gamer, so I could spring it on him in an interview. Let me get into the comments here. Sonia says, "What is the question? Open view versus closed view pertaining to?" Oh, the open view, closed view is open theism, which is a big debate amongst some people. We got some open theists, some who aren't. aren't. I'm actually somewhere in between. That to a certain degree, you have to admit that Christ was a little bit open view in this, because he didn't even know when his own second coming was going to be. The Father knew that. So the question is, does God know the future? I think the Father knows the end from the beginning. I think at times Christ chose to be a little bit open, and so that he could act in faith toward the Father. Joel Fink is totally open view, and then most of the pastors are totally closed, with a few exceptions of. Do you have any big thoughts on open theism, Bryan? It's not something a lot of pastors put a lot of thought into, because at the end of the day, you got to be focused on sound doctrines of grace and all this other stuff. So I'm going to qualify my statement. From what I understand of it, I generally am not really in favor. I think that a lot of the discussion assumes that predestination and foreknowledge are the same thing. Right. Which to me, they're not. They're not the same word. They don't mean the same thing when I look them up in the dictionary. And totally. I think that God foreknows the end from the beginning. He can tell us in his word certain things that will happen. Totally. Outside of the things that God has explicitly said in his word he will do, I think it's exceedingly dangerous for anybody to say God did this or that outside of those things that God said he would do. So I think that most of the things that happen to us, while they are foreknown, are the result of our own free choice interacting with the free choice of others. Totally. I don't tend to view myself as an open theist. Totally. I love that answer. Amy Stewart says, I'm so thankful for a pastor that is helping to retrain our brains to get focus off of the knuckleheads in politics. Exactly. We have a lot of reasons to be thankful for Bryan, but especially his dad. Blake Donaldson says, question, were you ever part of a band? Why does Blake ask questions he knows the answer to? Because if I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm curious to know. All right, so I will confess all my sins to you, okay, Joel? When I was in college, I was in a band, and the name of the band was Mysterion, which is the Greek word for mystery. And the geekiest band ever. I wrote all the lyrics to all the songs, and they were all about like Paul's apostleship and right division. So we were, of course, the most popular band ever. And but yes, I was in a band at one point. What did you play? What did you do? I didn't play anything. I just screamed a lot. So basically, you're doing the same thing, but without the music. So yeah, I guess I was the lead screamer. If you want to be full transparency. Sonia says, I never liked the old hymns except for Amazing Grace, but so much of the new music that I like has terrible lyrics theologically. I'm actually a lover of the old hymns. I have to admit it. I've always loved, It's Well With My Soul. I've always loved the story and the lyrics. There is nothing about anything today that's really worth, not the music. It would be rare to find a Christian group or a Christian band that would have good lyrics. You might find a song with good lyrics, but then you dive into the artist and it's just a mess and stuff. But I mean, there's nothing about media, entertainment. There's literally nothing out there for us except God's word. That's the only thing worth spending your time with. Let's see here. Anita says, yep, Blake and Amy, I know how music is applied. Bigfoot's in the house, by the way. He's leaving comments. He said, did he say wild swings or wild things? I like wild things, Bigfoot says. Here's a question for you, and this is a deep theological question. This is as deep as I get. Is there a distinction between Bigfoot and Yeti? Are they the same creature or are they different? Well, I I actually got Bryan quiet
Did
there.
somebody ask that?
No, that's all me.
So Yeti is a derived, he's a, culturally derived, to the Asian sightings.
No, that actually I never actually asked the question. The last time you were with us, I had asked Bryan what is a guilty pleasure for Bryan Ross, and he confessed that he actually watched a Bigfoot documentary. Were you actually convinced that Bigfoot existed, or did you just sort of laugh at the documentary the whole time?
Well, my biggest thing was just laughing at how dumb it was. I mean, it was so dumb, and as far as do I believe in Bigfoot? No, I don't believe in Bigfoot. I would say, though, that there are aspects of it that intrigue me as a sort of cultural anthropological study.
Right.
As far as why have all of these cultures worldwide in different continents, different places, why do they all have similar stories about these creatures? That
right.
part of it, I intrigues me. But I don't believe in the absence of proof of a 8-foot hairy monster running around North America.
And having said that, I can already kind of sense I need to get back into spiritual things. How about we dive back into before people are going to be like, what was that, Joel? That was just ridiculous. You just kept talking about Bigfoot. Okay, let's talk about real quickly. The latest book that you put out, which I also loved, that was a quick read, called "The Preservation of God's Word: A Close Look at Psalms 12, 6, and 7." And those verses, we all know those verses really well. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. Now, let me ask you, why? What was it about that discussion? What? I don't want to give away the conclusion here, but what is it about that book that made it important and worth publishing, in your opinion, Bryan?
Well, there's a few things. The first thing is, as soon as you enter into a conversation with, I would just say, and I don't mean this term disparagingly, but as soon as you enter into a conversation with a standard evangelical and the question of preservation comes up, it almost always goes to Psalm 12. And of course, the King James has Psalm 12, 6, and 7 preserving the words, whereas the NIV, ESV, and others, have that passage or teach that it's the people that are being preserved. And so, right out of the gate, when you encounter a conversation about preservation, etc., that always comes up. And so there's not a lot of clarity on that issue. And secondly, I do feel that, defenders of the King James, and let me be clear about it. I mean, I am a King James Bible believer, but I also feel that defenders of the King James have sort of, dare I say, misused the verse a little bit and have made it or applied it to things that I think the verse isn't necessarily talking about.
Right. Now all of the Bryan Ross fans out there, I think they already know Bryan's conclusion about these verses. But the thing about this book, as well as your King James Bible book that you put out, which was also, I thought, phenomenal, is that there's nobody else out there that's keeping the King James advocates intellectually honest, really. And there is a need for that, because you don't want to slip into absurdist reasoning that just doesn't hold up under scrutiny. You want to have a solid, consistent, critical thought process about the preservation of His Word that is consistent with what the Word teaches. And I really appreciate the fact that you're the guy out there taking the blows, and you're willing to do that for the sake of keeping all of the advocates honest. I think that's a phenomenal thing you do, and I really appreciate that. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I appreciate you acknowledging that. I mean, I think, some folks, they hear me say stuff, and it's not quite exactly like what they've always heard, and so they assume that I've like taken up for the other side.
Right.
Which isn't not at all what I'm doing at all. But what I'm saying is, well, I say two things. First of all, the King James only movement has historically, all the thought leaders in the King James only movement have been Acts 2 Baptists.
Right.
All across the board, nearly in every case that has been the case. And so, my fellow Mid-Acts pastors who are King James advocates have sort of, adopted the argumentation of the Acts 2 Baptist movement on this particular issue in a way that they would never allow on any other issue.
Right.
And I think it's because this is a hard issue. This is Pastor Jordan recently compared it to, the making of sausage. It's messy. It's dirty. It's not. Everyone wants things to be in very sort of neat and tidy constructs. And when you really sort of do the hard work of looking behind the process, you realize it's not as neat and tidy as you thought.
Right.
That doesn't mean you believe God didn't preserve his word. It just means it's not exactly the way things are portrayed in this literature.
Right. Let me ask you another question. Why was his word purified 7 times? Because I'm asking you that because we have a theory that I want to run past you. You want to hear my theory? Actually, I should say our theory. Every time I go to these verses, a lot of people speak up about it. But in Isaiah 11:2, you've got those 7 spirits, right? The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge, and of the fear of the Lord. So you got 7 spirits there. And I have a lot of these members in our church love to point out, you got the 7 spirits in 11:2, and then you've got in Revelation 1:4, the 7 spirits which are before the throne. So the theory, and I just want to run this past you, this theory. It was purified 7 times because the Holy Spirit's 7 in 1. You had 7 spirits that essentially purified the word before it was put to paper. What do you think about that?
Well, I honestly have to think about that and study that. I've never heard anybody say that before, which doesn't automatically make it wrong, obviously.
No, yep.
I need to think about it, but for me, I just read the verse at face value.
Yep.
The words of the Lord are pure words.
Yep.
As.
Yep.
Well, as silver tried. Well, how pure are they? They're
right.
as pure as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Now, a lot of King James advocates, they want to go to that and make this big numerical argument about, how there's a 7-fold purification of the English Bible that took place from Tyndale through to King James, and the King James is the 7th English Bible of the Textus Receptus, and how therefore is the pure one. And I've taught that myself, okay? I grew up hearing that, believing that. I've taught that myself. I've got videos and recordings of me saying that.
Yep.
But
to
me, that whole argument breaks down on 2 fronts. Number one, the numbers don't work. So are we supposed to count Tyndale as one, or do we count all 3 of Tyndale's editions?
Right.
Do we count the 3 editions of the Bishop's Bible, the 5 editions of the Geneva Bible? Like, what exactly are we supposed to count, and what verse tells us how many we're supposed to count these as, and so on? And then the second thing is, I just don't believe David in Psalm 12 is talking about an early 17th century English Bible.
Right. Totally.
I believe he's talking about the words that he's writing right here in Psalm 12, that these will be kept, that these have been purified and that they'll be preserved. And it's because of this promise that we, still have the Word of God today, because God promised to preserve His Word. Right. So I have a little bit of a different take on that, because it just doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Which reminds me, I had Joel Fink on here last week, and he talked a little bit about the Septuagint, and I wondered if I could get your take on what he said, because he had the Paul's Old Testament quotes, which is actually for me a phenomenal book. But because he went through like 140 references times when Paul would quote the Old Testament, and you had exegesis for each one of those verses why he was quoting the Old Testament. And I swear he never quoted the Old Testament for the same reason twice. And but then he would have the Pauline verse, then you'd have the Old Testament reference, then he'd have the Masoretic text, and then he had the Septuagint. So I asked him what his thoughts were about the Septuagint, and he basically kind of he felt it was valid and had pointed out that the King James translators highlighted or cited or referenced the Septuagint in the prologue to the 1611. What would your thoughts be about that? Can I ask you that, or do you want to skip?
I guess I have two thoughts on that. First of all, somebody has to show me a copy of the Septuagint that the King James translators actually used. So where was this at, and where was there a print copy of the Septuagint at in the early 17th century for the King James translators to use? Right. Because I don't know of where that exists, okay, as a historical document, I'm saying.
Right.
Okay. Second, the issue with what is it? Is it Psalm
14?
Psalm 14, verse 3, right?
I think, yep.
Yeah. So there are the Hebrew Masoretic text, which is the traditional Hebrew Old Testament,
right,
ends Psalm 14, verse 3 at the period.
Right.
They're all gone aside. They are all together become filthy. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. End of the end period, right?
Right.
Well, I have a copy of the Septuagint here in my office that includes 48 Greek words and nearly 6 verses from Romans chapter 3,
right,
that are backdrafted into the so-called Septuagint. So to me, that is not proof that Paul used the Septuagint. That is proof that the Septuagint did not exist before the time of Christ, and had to have come into existence after Paul wrote the book of Romans.
Right. The notes you did on the Septuagint and the research on that I thought was phenomenal. I was fully persuaded on that, and the point about 14:3 really for me is a slam dunk on the whole subject. And good on you for finding that. That's where do you find this stuff, man? That's amazing.
I can't take full credit for that. David Daniels from Chick Publication did a little booklet. Did Jesus use a Septuagint? And I read it, but I've gone down this road enough with King James only advocates to know that I have to fact check them, because a lot of stuff is said in a lot of these books that just isn't true. I can't find evidence that it's true. So when I gathered all the pertinent information and I fact checked it, I realized that the story as told by Daniel seemed to have validity, right, regarding that issue.
Okay, so from This Generation Forever, that series you're doing, you're spending some time reading books about the King James translation, and how many years has it taken us to finally get to the King James? We're finally there after 5 years or something. So what books are you reading to prepare for this next phase of that series?
So the book, the hands down, the book that everyone has to read that cares about the factual situation with respect to the printed text of the King James is David Norton's book, A Textual History of the King James Bible.
Right.
I read that book 10 years ago, and that book is the book that caused me to have to reevaluate some of what I was saying about the King James.
Okay.
So that book is absolute essential reading for anybody. And some other books are, let me walk over here to my...
Are you in your basement?
I'm in my office right now.
In your office? The famous office where you do your videos?
Yes.
Do you also study there?
What's that?
Do you study there?
Yeah.
Do you study anywhere else?
I study wherever I can study. I mean, if I'm waiting for my kids and I'm in the parking lot, I'm usually reading something.
Yep.
So the other one would be translating for King James. These are the notes of John Boyce, edited by Ward Allen. That's absolutely essential.
Right.
The Coming of the King James Gospels, a collation of the translator's work in progress by Ward Allen.
Right.
I've got stuff here that I'm going to be talking about in the coming months. I've got an epistle to the learned nobility of England touching translation of the Bible from the original with ancient warrant from words from 1597. I've got a Concord of Scripture by Hugh Broington from 1588. These are important because they show that there were calls for a new translation before James ever ascended to the throne of England. The King James Bible by David Norton. Manifold Greatness, the Making of the King James Bible. Those are just a few.
Yep. Phenomenal. I gotta say, I think the most revelatory, amazing thing in that list for me has got to be the John Boyce note. Now, I have not read all the volumes you've read, but the John Boyce notes, man, that's a game changer, really, isn't it? You can actually look at what the debates were amongst the translators on a verse by verse basis. That's just mind blowing to me that kind of a document even exists.
The notes of Boyce are one of three primary documents that are known to exist. Okay, the other two are a document called Manuscript 98, which is a document created by the translation company that was preparing the epistles. So this would have been all Paul's epistles and the general epistles, Hebrews through Jude.
Okay.
So they created a document, and then there's another document called Bod 1602, which is a edition of the 1602 Bishop's Bible with the handwritten notes of the translators in the margin. Okay. So we have three views into what the work actually was that was being done, and each one of these documents gives you a little bit of a different view and a little bit of a different angle of the work in progress.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to get back into the live chat here. Blake says another nickname for Christopher is Tofi. Might have to be a new nickname. I've not heard of Tofi. You should have never told me that either, brother. Let's see here. I'm just going to skim here. I would love to read everybody. I'm going to skim here. Go straight to questions about questions of Bryan. Bigfoot says, my wife is a right dividing girl, makes me happy. I think she would buy her own comb, though. Dan says, I like BC Ross. Oh, there you go, BC Ross. I like that. There's a lot of discussion with Bigfoot about his usages of combs. Sonia says, Pastor Bigfoot David Reed, I'm pretty sure your wife does not use your... That's hilarious. Bigfoot says Cousin Yeti doesn't rightly divide, though he needs prayer. Blake's heading out. Dude, it was awesome having you here, Blake. I love you. I can't wait to see you and Amy. I truly can't. I'll pray for his musical taste, though. Let me see. There's a little discussion about David Osteen in Georgia here. Paul Lucas in Dallas. Joel, are you still bouncing off the walls? Yeah, I literally did not sleep last night. I'm still bouncing off the walls about the conference. Sonia had earlier asked for some details about the conference. You want to talk about that, Bryan? Let me tell you something, man. I cannot stop thinking about my messages. The first message I'm going to do, it's going to change your life. I think I just might, it might be one of those messages where I might just blow the minds of a few people in that church. I don't know, but Philemon is a book for me where it seems like you get these phenomenal guys, they do these commentaries on Paul's epistles, and then they get to Philemon, and for whatever reason, they turn their brains off, and they just put very little thought into that letter. And if you spend the same amount of time on Philemon that you would something like Ephesians, you're going to realize that, very little of the commentaries got anything right. So there's a lot of... It's one of the rare books where if you study it hard enough, you will come up with new material nobody may have seen before, at least today, right now. And you might be able to show people some new stuff. And there will be some new stuff I'm going to show. I have no doubt most of you people have never heard. I can't tell you how excited I am about that conference. Philemon's I'm a total Philemon junkie. I spent a whole year studying that book. David Osteen ain't got nothing on me on Philemon. I'll tell you that right now. I cannot wait to meet that man too. I'm sorry. Okay, so you have a conference coming up.
You covered it.
October 22nd, right, to the 23rd or 4th or something.
22nd through 24th.
Now, are there places where near your church where people can get a hotel room and stuff, or?
Yeah. So if there are people that want a recommendation or something like that, sometimes we have some folks in the assembly who are willing to host people. I would need to know, well in advance if somebody was, wanting to come and see if there was a place they could stay. There's also hotels, within about 10 minutes of the church building that we could recommend if somebody wanted a recommendation.
What made you choose Philemon?
Well, I've always been interested in Philemon also, and I want to do something different this year at our conference, and Philemon is, just the right size to be able to really dig into it pretty substantially with one weekend of 8 messages. And that's, that was kind of my other idea is let's find a book here that we can really do some deep digging on in a short amount of time. And obviously Philemon fit the bill.
That reminds me of a joke David Reed said. He said, you should get up there and compliment Bryan for choosing a letter that's longer than his last book.
I'm gonna have to have words with him on that one. I see in the chat, I've got it running, that Randy White is here.
Oh, is he? I haven't gotten that far.
Type an update on Randy, the question came up about the timing of the Grace History Project. Do you have any update on that? I'm running your show now, Joel.
Yeah, thank you. Do it. Bring it, man. When David Reed was here, he just started the show on his own, and he just said, "I'm taking over. Sorry, it's mine now." Sandra Briggs is in the house too. A lot of comments from Bigfoot here. I enjoy butterflies. My wife likes bees. It's okay, more butterflies for me. He's a poet and he didn't know it. Okay, so what's next in line for you in terms of books that might come out and be published? Do you have anything in the works right now that might be coming out in the near future?
Well, Randy could attest to this. I always have something in the hopper that I'm willing to give, to get printed. There's a lot of projects I have that I want to get done that I just don't have time to. The only thing that's really in the works right now is, obviously the Grace History Project. Randy says we now have a second editor on the Grace History. Okay, good. Appreciate that update, Randy. So that's obviously a big one. The next thing I really think I need to do, Joel, is our ministry needs to put out some sort of a basic book just about right dividing.
Yep.
Of course, I have all sorts of other. I want to get this whole project on the Bible, the inspiration, preservation, canonicity, transmission, and translation of the Bible. That eventually needs to be a book along with the Grace History Project. I've got a lot of notes about other things. I actually have other books that I self-publish through Bible Doctrines that I don't advertise on the internet. I'd like to try to get those also into, a nicer format through, either Dispensational Publishing House or Randy's self-publishing arm, Trust House. But I just haven't had time to get into all that. I don't have enough time to do all this stuff.
Randy White. I see Randy White's comments. Dude, I love you, man. I love you. I love that my beautiful bald-headed brother with the beautiful suits. Hey, did you know, Bryan, when Randy does his live streams, his Ask the Theologian live streams, and he's got this beautiful suit, you know what he's wearing under the table? Shorts.
You know this for
a
fact?
Little known secret. That's right. I do know this for a fact. That's right.
Well, I would do the same thing. I would do the same thing when I was hosting distance learning classes from my office here.
Can I make a suggestion about a book, Bryan?
Well, yeah, sure.
I think you should publish a book on verbatim identicality, and I think that you should not write it by yourself. You should get David Reed to help you with it, so it could be sort of like a legal brief. Huh?
Yes, thank you for reminding me of the other book that's in the works.
I think you should totally publish that book if you should feel inclined to write it. And when it does get published, I'm going to take all the credit for suggesting it.
So I'm sure you will take all the credit. We're still working on tweaking some stuff in that book, and we feel like we need to add some additional examples and documentation.
I totally agree. That was my first thought. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Randy, you need to publish way more books. What are you doing, dude? It's just, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a way to give Randy White grief, but I can't think of it. Now, we also have a Satan worshiper in the live chat. He comes and visits periodically. It's called Truth for Satan Ministries. I don't know if we'll have a chance, Druin, to answer all of your questions. Cliff says, let me see here. Let me see if I can find something really juicy to ask Bryan. And we're getting around noon here, so I'm gonna skim through the comments, see what any other questions or thoughts anybody has. I'll throw it at Bryan, and then Bryan, you mind giving the gospel at the end?
No, I've got no problem with that. There was somebody who asked us something in here some point about Gail Ripplinger. Oh,
okay. I think, if I remember right, Fred actually met Gail and tried to give her right division, but she wouldn't bite.
Okay.
Isn't she the one that did the? It was a King James Bible book. It was I forget the name of it.
She's written, she's written a lot of books. She's written New Age Bible versions.
That's it. That's what I'm thinking of, New Age Bible versions. That's it.
She's written the language of the King James Bible, discovering its built-in dictionary, understanding, and all of that. She's written a lot on the King James issue. And I'm just going to be, I appreciate anybody who takes a clear stand on the issue of the Word of God. Ripplinger is a Bible defender and a King James advocate, etc. But I have to be honest, I do not recommend her. I don't find her to be an honest source of information. I've documented throughout my classes time and time again of her manufacturing quotes, leaving things out, and not accurately representing things that she's reporting, and I cannot recommend her for those reasons. I don't remember how the conversation went. Fred had told me a couple of times they loved her. They reached out to her. They actually met with her. I think, if I remember right, I think he said in her home.
They went and met her and did their best to try to give her right division, and she just would not listen to reason at all, which was a real shame. Now the Satan worshiper, which his name's Druin, Truth for Satan, is mixing things up in the live chat. Normally I would jump into that discussion, but I just we're running out of time here, and I want to just get any questions directed at Bryan. Amy Stewart, let's see here. My beautiful suits go so well with my shorts, Randy White says. Randy, one of these days I'd love to have you on, brother. And because I have like 10 questions about how you take care of your bald head. Does it require a lot of work when you get up in the mornings? I mean, do you have to put how do you make it so shiny? That's what I want to know. How do you make it so shiny? Because you've got the most beautiful bald head, probably in the entire Grace movement. Although I've got Josh Strelecki on tomorrow. He's got a beautiful bald head too. So I don't know. I have to compare I'm going to compare your bald head to Josh's tonight and make some judgments. Who does a better job? But it's so shiny and it just looks so good. And you ever come to Florida, you got to come in here too. I want to see if I could see my reflection. I love you, man. I do. I totally love you, Randy. It's so great having you here. I'm going to get through the comments here, and then I'm going to have Bryan give us the gospel. We have Keith Allen. Is in the house. He says here in the Flint area, they had some guy talking about Connecticut number 1. Can't think of his name. Is it supposedly a Hebrew text? And when he says Connecticut, KENNICOTT number 1. Can't think of the name. It is supposedly a Hebrew text. Know anything about that? I know nothing about that. Do you, Bryan?
I have no clue what that is.
Oh, hey, Josh Strelecki is in the house too. Twin City. He says, thanks, Joel and Bryan, for your ministries. Love you, brothers. I can't wait to have you on tomorrow, bro. I love you to death. I can't wait to interview you. So we got 2 bald guys in the live chat, man. That's amazing. Randy says the most beautiful bald head in the entire Grace movement. Can I use that as a new motto?
Is Randy not broadcasting today? He's usually on right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, Randy, and I'll have you know, I try to end it at noon because I don't like to compete with you because I do appreciate your ministry so much, and I like to try to be able to get out and get over to your podcast if I can. Josh Strelecki says, Randy's bald head wins out. I find comfort with the bald head via Elisha's ministry.
I don't know if Josh can hear me, but how you doing, Josh? Good to see you there.
I don't know. I told Josh the other day, I don't want to know anything about him. I'm just going to go in blind and just go through his, his whole life history basically, and his conversion and being in the ministry and the history of Twin Cities Fellowship and all that stuff. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him tomorrow. Amy Stewart says, Joel, in case you and Bryan missed it, I'd like to see a shorter version of your Right Division 101 to share. Most people don't seem to want to listen to a series of 30 sermons. Awesome. Love it. Truth for Satan. Thanks for joining us. Randy says, I have a rare Monday off. You can go as long as you would like. I'm doing good, Bryan. Appreciate you, brother. Okay, well, look, how about, let me see if I have any other questions here that I want to ask Bryan. Because I had a long list here. Let me see. No, I covered everything. Here, I'll throw one last thing at you, Bryan, and then we'll go, and then we'll give the gospel here. Now, you had some debates. Well, I shouldn't say debates. Discussions with believers about charity and love. And I am totally with you 1,000% on all of that. But there was a thing that I think Hal pointed this out to me years ago, and I want to just get your reaction to this, because you have, in the King James, you have both love and charity used to translate agape. Now, I've come to think that, look, you look up love in the Webster's 1828, you look up charity, you're going to see some slight flavors of distinction between the two. And it's not that you have to make a distinction between those two words, but I think those two different words used to translate the same Greek word, you take those two different words and you combine them, and then you get a fuller appreciation of the meaning in the Greek. What do you think about that kind of thought? Because, like, if you look at love and charity, Webster would say for, love in a general sense, to regard with affection on account of some qualities which excite pleasing sensations. Basically, you have great affection towards something. But with charity, you have a slight distinction there in the sense of, in a general sense, love, benevolence, goodwill. Webster points out that it's the disposition of the heart that inclines men to think favorably of their fellow men. So, I would get up and behind the pulpit and say, well, look, agape love isn't just love. Agape love isn't just great affection towards something. Agape love is also charity, which is not so much love in action as it is the attitude, the disposition of the heart that produces the love in action. And I just throw all of that out to you to get your thoughts. What would be your reaction to that, Pastor?
So, again, my response to that would be, if I'm reading Paul's epistles in the first century and it says agape, do I get that do I get this nuanced meaning, or do I need to know English to get it?
Now, the problem with that is that the thought's a little too logical, and I have issues with logic. I'm totally kidding.
So here's my thing, okay? So if I adopt a position that says that charity is somehow this discriminated shade of difference meaning from love,
right, then
I have to say that the AV, the King James, is revealing information not found in the Greek.
Right.
Which now, by logical extension of what I believe dispensationally, causes a problem and a conflict with my dispensational beliefs.
Right.
That the Word of God is complete and that there is no revelation or inspiration being given past the completion of the New Testament canon.
Right.
And now I have a whole different kind of a problem because I don't want to recognize that charity and love are synonyms.
Right. Great thoughts. Love it. Love it.
So back to the book. If God preserved His Word from this generation forever, then that means anybody all down through the history of the dispensation of grace, regardless of whether they're reading Greek or Gothic or any whatever language they're reading, even Latin, I dare say, they have to be able to get that understanding out of what God's preserving for them at that time that they're living. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to adopt now a position about specific words in the King James Bible that require me to have that specific English Bible, now I think you're making all kinds of problems on the back end for your view of preservation.
Yep. Love it, dude. Cliff Matthews says, there's a new theory on the live chat with Bob, thinking that perhaps Randy White is Bigfoot. That's a really good theory. I love that. Randy says the English word charity came from the Latin caritas, if I'm saying that correctly. In the Latin word, caritas was exclusively a Christian expression of agape. Love wouldn't have been sufficient because it is too broad. Love that thought, Randy. Thank you, my dear brother. Love you, man. Amy Stewart says that King James is a modern English. Old English is pretty hard to decipher. Let's see here. There's some more comments with truth for Satan.
So let me just, can I just circle back to the comment that Randy made there?
Would love to hear it, brother.
So historically so when Wycliffe sat down to translate, he was into Middle English, not modern English. He's translating from the Latin Vulgate, okay? there are two words in the Latin. One is the word delectio. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And the other one is the word cateris, the Latin word that Randy's bringing up. When Wycliffe translated into Middle English, every time this delectio word was there, he used a form of love. It's the idea of to highly esteem, to love. Every time the word cateris was in the text, he uses the word charity. Okay, so so you're talking to, I guess, an admitted sort of nerd for knowing all this stuff, but so that doesn't become a problem until William Tyndale sits down to translate the Greek of Erasmus in the 1520s, and he intentionally does not use the word charity because he perceives it to be a Catholic word, because of the way that where it's coming from, its origin, and where it's being found. So all of the Bibles, is from Tyndale, the Matthew's Bible, the Coverdale Bible, the Great Bible, the Geneva Bible, and the first edition of the Bishop's Bible, every single one of them use the word love exclusively, in distinction to the Catholic use of the word charity, or at least what they perceive to be the Catholic use of the word charity. Right. And it's not until you get to the second edition of the Bishop's Bible from 1572 that 28 times that revision switches from love to charity in those same 28 instances that it shows up in the King James.
Yeah, I remember that chart, actually. Yeah, yep. You're absolutely right. I remember that. I remember that. This is, I get charged from Bryan on the distinctions between on the usages of love and charity, the different translations. Because that makes you my new best friend. Love it. Let's see here. Okay, I think we've got to the end of the chat. Bryan, you want to give us the gospel? If you're out there and you're not sure what your eternal destiny is, and you might be wondering how can I be saved? What must I do to be saved? What do you have any good news for him? If you need help with the gospel, I'll totally help you, brother.
It's very simple. God loves you. Christ died for your sins, was buried, and rose again. When you believe that he died on the cross for your sins, was buried, and rose again, when you believe the simplicity of the gospel, God will save you that second you believe it. You don't have to, walk an aisle. You don't have to do anything religious. You just have to believe and trust that Christ died for your sins, was buried, and rose again. And in that moment, in that instant that you believe and trust that, he'll forgive you of your sin and give you eternal life as a free gift.
Love it. All right. How about we close in a word of prayer? Heavenly Father. Oh, sorry.
Before you pray, I just want to thank you for having me on. And thank you to these 50 or however many people have sat here for an hour and almost 2 hours and listened to me yammer.
Dude, it's phenomenal having you here. I love it. I'm so grateful for your time. And I hope I let slip that you were hitting the gym this morning. I can't wait to see you looking like Schwarzenegger in a year, brother. I cannot wait, dude. That's just awesome, brother. I love you to death, and I'm so excited to see you. I am still bouncing off the wall. I cannot wait to be inside that church. I can't wait to hear your band, and I can't wait to just stand behind that pulpit. I'm literally I'm on pins and needles counting the days until I'm up there, and I am going to blow their minds if I can. And you give Becky a great big hug for me also. The poor girl, when she was here for a ladies' conference, I dogged her with 1,000 questions about Bryan Ross, her husband, and the band that she has in the church. That woman's got a lot of patience, man. She's a beautiful, beautiful woman. So you give her lots of love from all of us down here also. Okay, how about a word of prayer?
All right.
Heavenly Father, how grateful we are to have Bryan Ross with us today, being willing to spend time with us. And we're grateful for every single soul that's in the live chat, all our subscribers, the members of this church. And we're grateful to have this opportunity to be able to come together and just talk about your word and the preservation of your word. And we're grateful for Randy White and Josh Strelecki and all the pastors Pastor Freddie Bear and all the pastors who joined us today. Father, there's just there's a few people I want to lift up. I've got on this long list, I'll just highlight today just a few saints, and I want to start with Neil Maranatha, who was able to join us, who I love. This issue that he has with COPD, I think of him and his whole family. There is Mark 8:36, Pam Bloodworth and her family, Lion of Judah. I want to Pastor Sam Gerhardt and the cancer. I totally lift him up. Sonia and Bryan, whom I love, their entire family, that they might come into the knowledge of the truth. Jake and Suzanne Holdsworth and Jake's dad. Sue Ellen and Duke. The 5 unspoken requests. Rodney B. Douglas Graham. The wonderful Charlotte, who joined us at the beginning. And I totally lift her up. I pray that she'll also come into the knowledge of the truth and rejoice in everything you made her in your son. The entire Light Fritz family, Daron, News Unit, Greg and Delilah, Pam and Jerry Bloodworth, the Robin Scott, Karen Gray. Totally think of her and her stepdad and her mother, her brother Doug, the entire family, and especially Karen. I totally lift her up. Mary Beth and Betty Joe, Justin Cox, Dan the Man, Oral Carter, Anita and her 3 brothers, Sherry and Al and Sherry's son Adam, Dave and Nancy Perry, Jay and Lisa Montero, Debbie Bridges, Fred and Gwen, Hal and Marilyn, and all this, Mike and Renee, Chris Nelson, my mad bad back brother out there in Utah, Frank Ledoux, Maria in Colorado and her daughter Annette, Randy and Ellen's son Peter, Lourdes in Puerto Rico and her son Rafi, Bobby Wilson and her health, Mike Moriarty, Larry's daughter Wendy, Amy Stewart, ministry opportunities with her family, and the Coolies, Alice's request for Karen, Andy, and Oscar. I lift all of them up to you, Father. I pray that in all these circumstances, they will be a shining light in an increasingly dark world. They will glory in their infirmities like Paul did. They will celebrate the empowerment that they have by your grace. Be comforted by your word, strengthened by your spirit. They'll draw ever closer to you in their relationship. And I certainly hope that, those that are sick get better, but I also hope that in these circumstances, your Son will be glorified in all of us. That all of us together will also abound in love and grace and support one another, and that everything we all do will be to the honor and glory of your Son, our Savior. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. We do short prayers here, Bryan. Hey, thank you so much, guys, for coming out. We've got Josh Strelecki going to be here with us tomorrow, which I'm very excited to do. And Bryan, dude, you the man. I love you to death. I can't wait to see you, brother.
Yeah, we're looking forward to you coming up, and thanks for having me on. And for, again, everybody, I saw at some point somebody said there was a record today of 51 or 53 views. Is that the case? We have concurrent views. I don't know. I think you might have tied the last time you were here. We had a lot of views the last time you were here with us. David Reed, I don't remember what his was. So I don't know. When I get somebody like you and David Reed on, I don't remember who had the most numbers. So we'll see. But yeah. We'll need to tune in for Josh then tomorrow, eh?
Yes, Josh. Hal Beckenmeyer is here too. I love you, Hal. We'll be back here at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning on Tuesday with Josh Strelecki. Come on back. You guys have a truly bad day today. I love you all dearly. You take good care. Bye-bye.
All right. See ya.